Hello, everyone. I'm the director for our New Zealand registered not-for-profit charitable educational trust called Common Knowledge, and we hold all of the skills of birthing better. And these were the skills that I and hundreds of mothers and fathers developed in the U.S. in the early 1970s for our births, all of our births. We discovered immediately 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth. Pregnant women are not pregnant forever. And the only way to not be pregnant is to give birth. And we also discovered really, really promptly that giving birth is always an activity. It's an activity in time. It's like going from A to B in a car, but you do it in time. You are driving to the hospital, being prepped and in surgery for an elective cesarean, that's time. Your labor starts, it can be vague, your baby's born, that's time. If you have skills to do that activity, you will always birth better. Because basically you have a choice. No skills? Skills. If you choose to birth without skills, that's your choice. But if you choose to birth with skills, then you have a huge advantage. So let's talk about those skills in relationship to home birth. In 1970 in the United States, every state had its jurisdiction. There were no midwives. That didn't mean there weren't people attending home births, but the majority of women were birthing in the hospital. The families that developed birthing better were a unique group. Many of them were highly religious, and they would never see a doctor, so they were going to have their baby at home. And they were often medically high risk, and they wanted to reduce those risks. Others just wanted to have their baby at home because that was the new trend of thinking, that childbirth was a natural life event and you should just birth at home, that going into the hospital was going to impose these standards of care, these assessments, monitoring procedures, or these interventions on you, and if you didn't want them, birth at home. So people birthed at home. Hospitals weren't always welcoming if you transferred to the hospital. In other countries, home birth was absolutely the norm. Now, in each country, there may be protocols. So, for example, it may be that all pregnant women cannot choose a home birth. It may be that only low-risk women or not first-time mothers. That's country to country. In countries where there's no medical care, everybody births out of a hospital because there isn't any medical care. But in those communities, some women go off by themselves. That's the cultural norm. Some go off with a family group of women and are gone for months. That's the norm. Some women birth wherever they live with whoever is there. Some cultures, pregnancy and childbirth are women's business, and in other cultures, it's just societal's business. So in a home birth today, what does that really mean? Well, whether you're in a country where home birth is normal or in a country that it isn't, home birth actually then unfortunately becomes a political statement. It becomes a health issue statement and it becomes a political statement. And that's sort of a shame because it takes the focus away from us, those of us who birth at home. And the reality is all of us get pregnant to have a baby, not a type of birth. Our birth will occur someplace with or without anybody around, whether we have choices or lack them, or whether those change, whatever our circumstances are, whatever our beliefs are around childbirth, and whatever happens to or around us. We can only get out of pregnancy one way, and that's by giving birth, one way or the other. And so when we have a home birth, depending on the policies of your country, there will be nobody with you for a long time and only come for the delivery and the placenta birth and make certain you're okay and leave. Or you'll be in a place where your care provider, your midwife or your doula will spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours with you. So what's your role? As a woman giving birth, our role is to do the activity of birthing our baby. And here's a question. What is an activity? It's something we have to do. So how many of you who are listening to this are thinking, well, why is birth an activity? It's just a normal physiological thing. It just happens. Well, it does happen. So then we have to mentally make comparisons between that and other physiological things that humans do. And for most of us, we just sort of run into a blank. What are other physiological things that we do, right? One is being horny, having sex. So, did you learn skills to be a good lover? Hopefully, right? How about being hungry? That's physiological. So, all of us with kids, how many years have we spent taking inappropriate things out of kids' mouths? So, humans don't instinctively know what things are safe to eat, and we certainly don't instinctively know how to cook. And we don't instinctively know how to be a good lover. And we don't instinctively know how to birth. If we're hungry and we just use instinct and we just go gnaw on a tree or just eat a berry, we have no idea whether that berry is going to kill us. If we use instinct around being horny and having sex, the likelihood is guys will get off and women will think, what was that? And birth, if we just use instinct about birth, one way or the other, the baby's going to come out. But what's the difference between sex and hunger and birth? Birth lasts a lot longer. We have to do that activity for a lot longer, and it's often connected with pain. And we can't get out of it. We can't stop. And so when Birthing Better developed in the early 1970s, it was with all of these things in mind that we, fathers and mothers, developed a set of skills. But we developed a bigger concept than just a set of skills. And that concept actually goes against the concept that you have heard today. So the concept that fathers and mothers developed was that when you're pregnant, it's normal and natural to self-learn birth and birth coaching skills, then use those skills to work through the activity of birthing your baby. In all circumstances, we get pregnant to have a baby, not a type of birth. It's an activity we have to do. So it's normal and natural to learn some skills to do the activity. That's the concept that Birthing Better families developed. That wasn't the concept when I gave birth in 1970, which was go to the hospital to have your baby. There's no way to know what your birth's going to be like. Birth's just going to happen. You'll have some assessments, monitoring, and procedures. Follow your doctor's orders, and let's hope you don't have a tragic outcome. Then in 1980, the ideas behind childbirth changed, which was women know what kind of birth they want. They just need to make a birth plan, exercise their choices and informed consent, and say no to medical interventions. And then she'll be right. So there are three concepts. So we continue to advocate for the concept to include everybody, that 100% of pregnant women will give birth one way or another, and it's normal and natural to learn some skills. Now, in the United States, where these skills were developed, home birth was legal in some states, not in others. Women still had home births. Midwifery was not legal, so other people were attending births, and we weren't always welcome to go to the hospital. And that's not true in countries that have integrated home birth into the maternity system. However, most people who want to have a home birth do not want to transfer, and they want to have a safe birth for the mother and the baby. Everybody does, no matter where they birth. So when we developed the skills, we first focused on really better labor management skills, the suffering in childbirth, which includes a much greater group of women than risks, or risks becoming problems, or problems becoming tragedies. There are infinitely more risks, fewer problems, and infinitely smaller tragedies. But the suffering in childbirth is extensive, still is around the world. And the suffering is not about a risk or a tragedy. It is about women not having skills to cope or manage, deal with, handle, work through, stay on top of, feel in control over the natural, normal, physiological pain of labor contractions. And when women don't cope well, and there is anybody else with them, those other people want to try to help. Or their other option is to just think, however the woman is behaving, whatever she's sounding like, whatever she's doing, is a normal and natural and physiological instinctive response to birth. Well, most women who feel out of control in labor are thinking, why aren't they helping me? Right? So you need to understand a home birth is a place our behaviors as we work through the activity of birthing our baby is universal wherever we birth. And that's why Birthing Better families develop skills for all births, our births, their births, and not a particular type of birth. So when we're at a home birth, because home births, even in countries where it's legal, are a political statement. Because the medical profession has been quite strong. And that has been coupled with a desire by modern people to reduce risks. Modern people are incredibly risk averse in all elements of life. They just want things fixed, and they want things fixed fast. And they want to prevent problems. And childbirth, it's a sort of a pinnacle of that. We get pregnant so infrequently. It's such a big experience. We're not having lots of children because 20 to 30% of our children are not dying because now we have immunization and antibiotics. So we have fewer children. And so we want those children to outlive us. So we don't want them to die at birth. But if we're suffering during birth, if we're not coping, if we lack skills, everybody wants to help us. Medical profession has medical pain relief. People at home either ignore women suffering because they think it's normal and natural, or they try to help. But imagine if we were all skilled. Just imagine if we were all skilled. Then we wouldn't be suffering as much because we would have skills to cope better. We would have skills to manage better. We would have a set of skills that our birth partner also had that were effective. That's what Birthing Better is. Not all skills-based systems are like this. But from our viewpoint, we just think you should learn some skills. We don't care if you learn Birthing Better. Just learn some skills and use them. And use them in order to cope, or use them to fill the time of doing this activity. Because if you don't, then you are more likely to begin to feel overwhelmed and out of control. And if you're at home and your birth goes on for a long, long period of time, whether you're in a country that accepts home births or not, you're more likely then to get transferred to the hospital. Which, with Birthing Better skills, we just keep using our skills. We use our skills because we're birthing our baby, not because of what's happening to or around us. We just commit to being a skilled birthing woman and a skilled birthing coach. And we do that no matter what is happening to us or around us. So we first focused on those skills to cope and manage better because the first childbirth preparation classes, Lamaze and Bradley, were not always the greatest skills. They didn't adapt, they didn't adjust, they weren't sustainable, and they were targeted to low-risk women as though those women would have a low-risk birth, which is a big assumption. And you need to also understand something that I had to come to understand in this 50 years. And if you want to do some research, Marjorie Tew, T-E-W, she was a UK researcher. I'm going to bastardize what she said because it needs to be said. She actually investigated risk factors in home births. And here's the reality. No matter how many risks a woman has, that is totally unrelated to how quickly her baby will get out of her body or how well she copes with that activity. In the same way, there is no correlation between whether women are healthy or having normal births or eat well or exercise with how well they cope with the natural, normal, physiological pain of labor or how easily their baby gets out of their body. It's something different. And what is that something different? You got a big object, it's got out a container, the container needs to open up. If the container doesn't open up easily, then the baby doesn't come down easily. And the process of opening up that container is often associated with intense pain that you can't stop and you don't know how long it's going to last. And that's the coping and managing. So when we developed these skills in the early 70s in the United States, some states you just had a home birth, other states it was illegal. So you were very discreet about it. And you're always discreet about it and you never really want to transfer to the hospital. So after we developed the coping skills, we realized that even when women coped well, many of us still had a longer first or second stage. So fathers who see the birth from the outside really got into this as an exercise in plumbing. It's a big object that has to come down, open up, then come down through and out this container. So how can we prepare this container to open up, become soft and pliable and mobile inside? And that's where Birthing Better developed all the bodywork skills and how to prepare the birth canal really appropriately. Perineal massage is just this. That does not prepare those tight, soft tissues and muscles inside the vagina. And those can stop you from dilating, because those can stop your baby from coming down into your pelvis, because those soft tissues and muscles are connected to the soft tissue on the inside of your pelvis. And the inside of your pelvis is where, when you have a contraction, the cervix has to be pulled back. It doesn't get pulled up. It gets retracted back into the pelvis. So if all that soft tissue is tense, we impede, and we don't know it, we impede that progression of labor. So when you're having a home birth, you want to safeguard your health and your baby's well-being. So the reality is that even when there are risks, and always keep this in mind, many risks involved in pregnancy and childbirth. Lots of women have risks, but there are fewer problems, and there are infinitely fewer tragedies. But if you have a risk, you don't know if you're going to have a problem. You don't know if you're going to have a tragedy. That's only hindsight. That's where the medical profession says birth is safe afterwards, whereas the natural birth movement says birth is safe until proven otherwise. But you can't always act on it at that time. And if we go through this correlation of big object inside a container, if that container has not been prepared to open up, and the risks occur because that container has not been prepared to open up, then, and we don't know that, then we don't know how having been able to open up the container would have lowered the potential risk or the problem. And that's what we know after 50 years, at least with our skills, is by opening up our container, by softening inside, by making our container mobile and soft and pliable, that the effort exerted by our baby via contractions to open up our cervix and come down through our bony structure that now has a pliability and mobility to it, and then come down through the soft tissue of our vagina and out of it, is easier. And when we apply those skills with women who have risks that could be potential problems and who are birthing at home, we cannot replay the birth. All we can do is say we can imagine what this birth would have been like had this woman and man not taken the time to prepare their body appropriately. Because we know from our experience in tens and thousands of births in hospital and at home that skilled women who have prepared their body and cope better labor better. They don't have those long labors because they have progressive contractions and a progressive labor, which we then had to figure out, what were we seeing? There was the difference between a progressive birth and a non-progressive birth, because the likelihood of non-progressive births going to hospital from a home birth was infinitely higher than a progressive labor being at a home birth. What drove a progressive labor to a home, from home to a hospital, was a clear, identifiable risk that was becoming a problem. And that didn't matter whether the woman was coping or not. But when you had a woman, whether she's coping or not, just go on and on and on and on and on and on. You hear these stories. I was in labor 72 hours. You don't want to be. I was in labor for 48 hours. You don't want to be. I was in labor for 36 hours. You don't want to be. I was in labor for 24 hours. You don't want to be in labor 24 hours if you can possibly help it. And if you are in labor for 24 hours, for God's sake, skills can make that time pass so much better than when you lack skills. So as we prepared our body for birth, those of us who had home births and those of us who had hospital births that were medically high risk, we birthed more effectively. And this is what we learned, and this is the skill that we're going to pass on to you today. What is a progressive labor? It's a very specific thing. What is a non-progressing labor? It is a very specific thing. So how do we identify these things? First of all, you need to understand that a labor contraction is the message your baby is giving you. Simple as that. Your baby is doing the work of being born. It stimulates the contractions. You won't. Your body doesn't randomly. It does it in response to something that is happening on the baby's side. Okay. So when you have a progressive labor contraction, and you need to know what that looks like, okay? Labor contractions start, progressive or not progressive. They begin to get more intense, progressive or not progressive. A progressive contraction has a defined peak. A non-progressive contraction plateaus off. A progressive labor, the peak begins to subside. A non-progressive labor, the plateau sort of moves away, and both of them eventually end. A progressive labor means that those contractions that start, intensify, peak, go away, come down, go away, they change in intensity. They become closer together, shorter, and more intense within an hour or two. That's just the fact. It has nothing to do with the dilation. 30% of women do not dilate until the last very short period of time before they give birth. But if their labor contractions are getting closer together, longer, stronger, closer together, that is a progressive labor. And the labor contractions, the baby's message is always, I can start a contraction, it gets more intense, it has a peak, it subsides, it goes away. That's baby's message. And what is the baby saying to you? The baby is saying to you, Mom, you don't have tension inside you. I can open up your cervix. I can move down through your pelvis. I can move into your vagina. I can move out of your body. Well done, Mom. Or it's saying to you, you are not bending my space by being in a posture or a position that does not align the top part of your body to the inlet of the pelvis. And by bending the space, you are bending me. And that is changing my relationship to your body. Or your baby is saying to you, you're also not compressing my space. You're not pushing on the sacrum, which compresses the space. You're not sitting on your sacrum to birth me. You're not compressing me. So if you're not compressing the space, if you don't have internal tension inside, and if you are not in a posture or position your baby doesn't like, if those factors are not influencing your baby, then and the size of your baby relative to your body is fair dinkum, then your baby will open up your body and your contractions will be progressive. They will become longer, stronger, closer together within a 1 to 2 hour period of time, and you will give birth to your baby somewhere within an hour, rare, 3 hours, rare 2, 4 hours, kind of 8, 12, 15 hours, because labor progresses in both first and second stage. So if you tighten your vagina, you can have a progressive first stage, get hung up in second stage. If your baby is relatively big for your body and you're at home and you do not know how to open up your pelvis, your baby can stall. If you have internal tensions because you were told to do pelvic floor exercises, your baby can stall because it's hard for the contractions to retract and open the cervix. If you are compressing, or the shape of your sacrum, or your length of your tailbone, any of this, the space, the map of your pelvis, all of that plays a factor. But when you have a progressive labor, your baby is telling you, you're not compressing the space, you're not bending in a way I don't like, and there's no tension that's stopping me. So if you're having a non-progressing birth, the labor contractions don't change for a long period of time. And you hear that very frequently. Home birth, hospital birth, doesn't matter. Just that labor went on and on and on. And we tried changing positions. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Remind me, okay? But your baby is telling you, you have internal tension, or you're bending my space, or the positions you're in I don't like, or you're compressing the space. That's what your baby's telling you. And we, as women, have not been taught how to recognize this, much less men who are seeing it from the outside. So in Birthing Better, fathers developed these skills. They could see on the outside. They could hear us. They could see us. They knew when we were having a progressive birth, and they knew when we weren't. And if it was in a home birth, a progressive birth made everybody feel more confident, even though there could be some risks and problems and even tragedies. But if we had a long birth, we were more likely to end up transferring to the hospital. Simple as that. We're often given pain relief. Just think about that. Why are we given pain relief? Because we're not coping. We don't have the skills. And that's why the message around childbirth since the 1980s, really since the 1970s when I gave birth, was a faulty message. The message should always have been 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth one way or another. It's normal and natural to learn some birth and birth coaching skills, then use those skills as you work through the activity of birthing your baby. That's the message that should have been given. Birthing Better went further because we developed ways to prepare the body. So let's go back to positions. When I gave birth in 1970, we didn't have any choices. We had to stay in bed, we'd lie down, couldn't eat, blah, 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 lay on our back, feet up in stirrups. And everybody goes, lying on your back, feet up in stirrups, how terrible. Well, you go lie on your back now and put your feet up in stirrups. How open's your pelvis? Wide open. Politically, it may not be nice that we're on our back and it's not gravity for the baby, but the baby is wide open bony structure, wide open. Okay, now go into the favored position, which is a semi-recumbent position, which is sitting back on your sacrum, putting your feet up, so you're just sitting with your feet up and opening up. Notice how much more closed you are in that position. Yes, the part of your body is upright, and you're closing your sacrum. And that's the bone your baby needs to move. And that's why semi-recumbent position can delay birth. Now get on all fours, because that's advocated. Get on all fours. Think about how you felt lying on your back with your feet up on stirrups. Lie on your tummy now, except your arms and your thighs are upright, but your body is lying on the ground. Notice whether you feel is open. But because you're in a position in which your baby falls to the ground, your baby no longer can tuck. And that means it brings a bigger dimension into your body, which means that your baby can still come through it, but the labor may slow down, and you're more likely to tear with a bigger object coming through you. So hands and knees isn't necessarily a good position. Being on a beach, on a ball, and leaning forward. If your labor contractions go off, if they become more spaced out, and don't have a peak, it's not a position your baby likes. If you're having very progressive contractions and you hate the pain, and you get in a hands and knees position, and the labor eases off and you feel relief, you're going to be in labor for hours longer because you've just backed off a progressive labor. If you're told to change positions frequently, your baby has to adjust to the internal changes in your body. Go back to lying on your back with your feet in stirrups. No, we do not advocate that, but it's a good way for you to understand your body and have a comparison because you're very open and you're not weight-bearing. So go lie on your back with your feet up in stirrups, feel how open you are. Go sit on a chair, feel how that changes. Go stand up, feel what changes in there. Take a step forward, another step forward, and feel what changes in there. Women are advocating walking. That's great, except we become weight-bearing, which tightens those muscles. And for some women and some babies, the labor just goes right off. So we had to work through all of this in the early 70s. The families that I worked with, many of them were medically high risk, so they were determined to lower the risk potential of becoming a problem and becoming a tragedy. Because they were very religious, and I'm not, and I have no medical training, they were dedicated to develop nitpicking skills. And that's what's in Birthing Better, the nitpicked skills. Never go through the course this way. Just pick the skills you want to learn as a pregnant woman, learn them. The ones you want to learn as a birth coach, learn them, and then teach each other, and then repeat it so that you can learn about the breathing and the body skills and preparing the internal work and the teamwork and the negative and positive voice and the progression of labor, end to end to end. Because what did we do? We elevated the activity of giving birth to an activity that we should have a mastery of skills. We don't always use the skills perfectly, but they're better than nothing. So we found that being highly skilled meant two things. We could reduce the suffering for sure if we kept using the skills. Hard work. Okay, we have to recognize that this is hard work. We don't always like the experience and we can't control it. So we have to choose to use skills to cope and manage. And we could reduce and prevent potential risks from becoming problems when we created space in our body, both in our pelvis, inside our pelvis, and inside our birth canal, and then read our baby's contractions. That was really important, to read our baby's contractions and to modify how we were sitting or our posture. And it can be very subtle for our baby, but fathers see and hear this from the outside and they can help. So if you have to go to the hospital, just keep using your skills. We didn't necessarily like all the fiddle. We just got on with it. We used skills to birth our baby. That was the commitment. We didn't think about whether we were 3 or 4 centimeters dilated. We just stuck our finger up and we felt whether there was change. We didn't think about whether or not we were going to have medical assessments, monitoring, and procedures if we had to transfer to the hospital. We just got on with our birth. We used the skills. And when do we use them? Every breath in. So when you breathe in now, expand inside your pelvis. Breathe in your nose. Expand inside your pelvis. You'll feel your sacrum move, not your pubic bone so much. And when you breathe out, soften inside your pelvis. That's a skill. That helps your body open up. That helps you give room for your baby. Breathe in and expand inside your pelvis, and breathe out and soften inside. Then couple that to where your sit bones are. Are your sit bones as far apart as possible? Because this is coming down through and out you. Can you mobilize your sacrum? If you can't, learn how. Because that's the bone your baby has to push out. And if you have back labor and you've been told, apply counter pressure to your back, you're closing off the space the baby needs. It's better to know how to mobilize your sacrum, soften inside, open up and expand. And people ask us all the time, how much room does your baby need if it's stuck? This is the question of the year. How much room? And when I teach, I say to people, how much room does your baby need if it's stuck? And people, not that much. We get that one. Most people go, about that much. That's not real. So let's do this together. Pinch your thumb and finger together. Can't move it. That's stuck. Right? Now just soften. Just breathe in and soften. That's unstuck. That's it. So when you're breathing in and expanding inside your pelvis, when you know that your sacrum can move, that's lots of room. Sometimes it's not enough room. You get a big baby and the shape of your pelvis, if you haven't learned to map your pelvis and you don't know what your baby's coming down through. But that's why Birthing Better fathers develop the hip lifts to create space and develop sit bone spread or develop the sacral maneuver. We did these things. So do we use them in home births? Of course we use them in home births. But we know how to do this. So if you're having a home birth, do it for yourself. Now, where's politics? Simple. People who are attending your home birth, they're either supported by the maternity system or they're not. We want home births to be an option. Would we like more women to birth at home? From our viewpoint as Common Knowledge Trust and Birthing Better, we want more skilled women birthing at home, not just home birth. We know from our 50 years of experience that women who are skilled and have prepared their body from 24 weeks onward and from 32 weeks onward to prepare their birth canal, they are much less likely to have a long and dysfunctional labor by suffering and by a delay of this big object coming through their container. So, birthing better families, birthed at home with risks or not risks, because we were skilled. And that's important. Birthing at home is a skill. Raising children at home is a skill. Having a child fall off a roof. If you have skills to help, you do better than if you lack skills. So, home is a place. Birth is an activity. Become skilled to birth at home. Support your midwives. And if you go to the hospital, go there using skills, because I want to tell you from our experience, when we did go to the hospital in states that did not approve of home births, and they were hostile as hell to us, when women went in coping, when fathers went in helping, those care providers at that moment negotiated beautifully with us. They didn't freak at all because they loved working with skilled families. Simple as that. Skills work on our end. They work as a couple or a family together, working together. They work to support those people giving us care at a home birth, and they work to make hospital staff more confident and more negotiable with us when we go to the hospital. So what can you do to help spread the word? Well, it's simple. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our Facebook page, donate on our websites. But what we want you to do more than anything is to now spread this new conception around childbirth. We are stuck. Birth choices do not give positive births to enough women, and we need to have every woman included and every father who's going to be at birth included in having a more positive birth. So we need a new idea. The present idea is that birth is natural. Women don't need to be taught skills. Cows and cats aren't. Women just need to say no to medical care, be left alone to labor. The midwife should sit in the corner and knit. She should make a birth plan and then be expected to know how to make decisions in the throes of labor. How's that working for us since the 1980s? Not well. Will work for a few women, but we want all of us to have empowered births. All of us, without exception, because 100% of pregnant women will give birth. So we need to change the message. So the new message, easy to say. It's normal and natural when pregnant to learn birth and birth coaching skills and then use the skills while you do the activity of birthing your baby, no matter the circumstances. That's an easy message. Give it. Give it to everybody. If you're a birth professional, give it to every single one of your clients. And then if you can, give them a handout of the skills-based methods you know. Tell them there's a difference between knowledge and information and skills. The knowledge and information will help them write a birth plan. The skills are what they use to do the activity. And then at 24 weeks, if you're a birth professional, ask them what skill, write it down. 28 weeks, write down the skill. 32 weeks, write down the skill. Keep a record of the skills that families have learned. Then at the birth, whatever the choices, whatever happens with the choices, if the woman and the other is looking like they're coping well, praise them for God's sake. Tell them how important it is that you are working with skilled families. Tell them how enjoyable that is. And then, if they look overwhelmed, refer back to their notes and say, well, you learned X, Y, and Z. Well, I said I did, but I didn't. Well, there you go. But yes, I did. But now things have changed. No, it's your baby's birth. Use your skills. So all of you who are home birth providers, you absolutely have got to change your attitude. Pregnancy and childbirth are normal, natural, physiological life events. Take 1,000 women who are not pregnant but childbearing age. How many of them have health issues? How many have economic, emotional abuse issues? How many of that 1,000? Lots. Okay? Lots of them are medication or in counseling. Lots of those 1,000. Now get them all pregnant. All of them are going to have a home birth. They're all pregnant. Some of them aren't going to now have a home birth because some of those issues got worse. Some of them got better. Some of them said, no, you can't have a home birth. Some babies have a problem. No, it's better you don't have a home birth. But it's natural, normal, and physiological that there are issues. And then have them all birth. There are other issues involved with birth. Pregnancy and childbirth are normal life events. That means anything that might happen could happen. We have the capacity to reduce that anything that might or could happen by preparing our body for birth and making it easier for our baby to come down sooner and faster and more effectively, and coping better. This makes common sense. We have to now have a new childbirth trend. It's not going to rise up from women. It has to now come down from birth professionals who are sick and tired, even at home births, of working for women who just labor for hours and hours and hours and hours and don't look like they're coping. It's always nice when you're with that woman who has that great home birth, isn't it? But that wasn't your purpose as a midwife or a doula. Your purpose was to attend birth. And if you want more of those women, you want more of them to become skilled. They'll listen to you. They value you. They want to know what they can do. We now have to grow a skilled birthing population where we self-learn birth and birth coaching skills in all pregnancies and use those skills in all births, including home births, because we want to protect home births. We want them to be safe, and we want to protect the care providers who are attending them and the maternity systems that either support them or don't support them. That's my rant for the day. Okay, on to more tomorrow and the next day. I've got a lot to say after 50 years. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.